if you focus on retaliation, you get down into the weeds. You got to pull back and understand that we are in a transitional period in this conflict, one that has the potential of seeing this conflict brought to an end. Of course, it will end with a strategic Russian victory. And Russia has to, there's a lot of complexities here. How do you manage the battlefield and your victories on the battlefield, and the necessity to continue to keep the pressure on Ukraine, and in doing so, NATO and the United States, with the political dynamic. There's a lot of people out there who are just saying, Russia shouldn't compromise with anything, just press forward, full speed ahead, all that. You mentioned Putin's conference. While the Russian economy is not on the verge of collapse or anything close to that, Putin acknowledged that the sanctions do have an impact, and that Russia is making adjustments. There was no panic in his voice. It was just a matter-of-fact statement that the sanctions do have an impact. So it's in Russia's long-term interest to get their economy back on an even keel, and you can't do that while you're at war. And then Russia has the issue of how to work with China to counter this new America that's coming at them. The Trump administration is not going to be the Biden administration. It's not going to be about the pursuit of the rules-based international order that underpin the Biden administration's national security policy. Trump is this nebulous America first, peace through strength approach that could be beneficial to both Russia and China in terms of bringing about stability, but also could bring about conflict. And it has to be managed very carefully. And it's better to be managing that in an environment where the United States is not on one side of a conflict that has Russia on the other side. That's in Ukraine. So, there is a lot of pressure on Putin to bring an end to this conflict. And so everything he does has to be measured in that. I think, the Russians believe that it was necessary to retaliate for the ATACMS attacks and for the assassination of Lieutenant General Kirillov. But how you retaliate is also important. What signals are you sending? Remember, there's a lot of signaling being done between Putin and Trump that can't be done. And normally you'd expect them to pick up a phone call and have a conversation, but that's not happening. And it can't happen right now. Trump's not the president. He can't be negotiating, behind Joe Biden's back. So what happens is you end up, sending messages. I think Putin's entire presentation was one giant message. I think every time Trump gets on and does his press conference, it's messaging. Whether Tucker Carlson, this independent journalist who high profile, close to Trump, went over to Russia, had an interview with Lavrov the same year that he had an interview with Putin. Was that messaging? Could be. There's just a lot of signals being sent, and what you don't want to do is jam those signals by overreacting or doing something that changes the political calculus. And so, yes, I think that one of the targets struck was the SBU headquarters. It's a justifiable target, but it wasn't struck with 3 Oreshniks. So, Russia did what it needed to do, but it didn't over signal. It's a strange time because, as an outside analyst, it's very hard to know, what is important for the Russians. I mean, I can sit here and speculate, but, what is Russia's priority? The economy? Is it tying up geopolitical loose ends? Trump has said he's going to target China in an effort to draw China away from Russia. What Is Russia feeling vulnerable on that? What measures are going to be taken to preserve the Chinese-Russian relationship? All of these are factors that are brought to the table when Trump and when Putin's holding his little inner circle meetings, and we're not privy to them, so we don't know what the priorities. But as Ray McGovern, whom you're very familiar with, has often said, it's imperative that we listen to what the Russians are saying. And so what I would advise everybody to do is go back and read the totality of Putin's conference. You don't get to pick and choose. That's not how Putin has worked over the course of 25 years as the leader of Russia. He says what he means, and there's meaning in every word. Even though that press conference is a hours long tour de force of impromptu speaking, there's nothing impromptu about what Putin is saying. He's prepared for every question. He knows these issues inside and out, and he's not going to sit there and say things that aren't backed by the intent of the Russian government. And so I'd go back and just pay very close attention to the totality of that speech, and in there you'll find a lot of significant hints about the direction Russia is going. And I think what I've described is pretty accurate.
There are many who see Russia being violated in terms of red lines that have been articulated by Vladimir Putin and Russia as a whole. The attacks on their territory with the ATACMS, whether it's this assassination of Igor Kirillov. What do you say to those who say that it seems like Russia is looking to be the weaker party here, that they are not responding with enough force against these violations?
Russia's the weaker party? Who's the stronger party then? I'm just curious, because if you're going to say that Russia's the weaker party, who's the stronger party? Name one party out there that's stronger than Russia.
Here it would be, according to these critics, it would be the NATO side. It would be the United
NATO's
States.
Stronger. A NATO that's in total dysfunction, collapsing as we speak, can't generate any meaningful force. Is NATO stronger? Wow. Okay. No, NATO's cowering in its own urine. Nobody's stronger than Russia on this issue, which is why Russia can afford to take, the little hits. I mean, Russia has drawn red lines. If you think Russia's the weaker party, then ask General Brown how many times he changed his underwear after the conversation with Gerasimov about the limits of ATACMS that Russia will tolerate. Ask the CIA analysts who had to sit there and to say, is Russia bluffing? And be compelled to sit down and tell congressmen in the White House, no, they're not bluffing. If you push them too far, there will be a nuclear war. Russia's not bluffing. Russia's not the weaker party. Russia's the smarter party. And the last time I checked on the battlefield, it was the Russian forces that were advancing significantly every day, inflicting horrific casualties on the Ukrainians, and not the opposite. It's the West responding to Russia politically. It's Russia that dominates the narrative about any potential negotiation. So this is just crap. This is a desperate act by desperate people to say, oh, look, we matter. You don't matter. You don't matter at all. The West doesn't matter. And that's just this. And this is one thing Trump needs to understand. He keeps putting these people out there that, like Keith Kellogg, who, say things that imply that Russia is somehow on its back feet. No, Russia's not on its back feet. Russia would like a politically acceptable end to this conflict, but Russia's not going to give away any of the things that it has won. I mean, I can guarantee you this: when this conflict ends, there will be at least 5 territories in their totality that will be part of Russia. Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, Lugansk, including the right bank of Kherson, Crimea. This will all be Russia, and it'll be recognized by the West and Ukraine as Russia legally. There's not going to be any of this Baltics, where the Baltics are part of the Soviet Union, but the West says no, they're not, and they're going to draw a little thing. No, Russia's not going to allow that to happen. Or because then the conflict will continue, and then you'll see, and there's been hints to this by both Putin and Medvedev, that there will be additional territories. I mean, this is the reality of the situation. The West literally has no leverage. Russia can go as far as they want to go, for as long as they want to go. Ukraine is collapsing. Ukraine will not survive this year. Their military, they're down to pulling 18-year-olds off the streets to come in and fill the gaps. The numbers that are coming out are recognized. Forget all this Keith Kellogg nonsense about, well, Ukraine's only suffered 150,000 dead, 1.1 million. Okay, it's Ukraine's rebuilt 4 armies, and now they're going to have to rebuild a 5th, and they run out of manpower. There's no men left. There's nobody left to fight. The Russians, meanwhile, haven't run out of manpower. Don't believe this human wave assault nonsense. Russia's not launching human wave assaults. The battles are bloody, but Russia dominates these battles. The only time Ukraine has an advantage on the battlefield is when they flood the zone with drones. And that's a temporary advantage. Yeah, it's bad news for the Russians that are, on the receiving end, but it doesn't change the outcome of the battlefield. Eventually, Russian supremacy in air power and artillery and communications and the ability to jam people, etc., prevails. And this is why Russia's advancing every single day across the entire line of contact, because they are dominating the battlefield. So the West is pathetic right now. It's basically an information war. What cracks me up is the Russians aren't losing any sleep for any of the crap that appears in American media. It's only us Western analysts who get spun up in it. The Economist said this. Since when has the Economist said anything accurate about Russia? The Financial Times says this. And the New York Times leads with a headline. So none of it's accurate. It's all propaganda, and it's all designed to spin not Russia, but us. Why? Because they want us to continue to support the transfer of billions of dollars to Ukraine. But it's just, throwing good money after bad, doubling down on stupid. No, I don't see any panic in the eyes of any Russian official talking. Watch Secretary General Riter next time he speaks. He's Mr. Twitch. Nothing but panic. Watch anybody who speaks about the conflict on the part of the West. Panicked, twitching, uncertain. Then watch the Russians speak. Steady, calm, because they know who's winning, and they don't care what we in the West think. The only reality that matters to them is the reality on the battlefield.
Well, let's actually listen to a short clip of Vladimir Putin to verify or validate or lack thereof, or the opposite. Scott, let's see. This is what Vladimir Putin had to say about that situation on the battlefield.
Our army is progressing. They're making advances, and the enemy cannot hold the positions. They withdrew. They organized some defenses, but they cannot hold those defenses, because tomorrow there will be the next advance. So they cannot stop our army. And if we stop for a week, we will give them time to make those positions a stronghold. We'll give them time to get additional supplies and additional military equipment. And what is very important, they will be able to train additional personnel.
Scott, it doesn't sound so much like someone who is on the weaker side or the panicked side. Your thoughts?
Yeah, no, that's what I said. There's not going to be, the notion that there's going to be a ceasefire or freeze on the battlefield. He just said it's ludicrous. We're talking, when we speak about Ukraine, we're speaking about a military that's very large, very sophisticated, with very deadly weapons in the hands of men who, for the most part, prepared to die to defend a position. And it takes a lot to knock that kind of military off kilter. The Ukrainians especially in the Donbass region have had 14 years to dig in, and they had defenses in depth. And what's happened is Russia, through tremendous amount of sacrifice and perseverance, has broken through that defensive zone. And so now the Ukrainians are falling back on unprepared positions. And as a result, they can't last in the face of a concerted Russian assault. This is why the Russians maintain pressure on them the whole time. The Ukrainians can't dig in. And look what Putin said. We're not going to have a ceasefire. We're not going to let them dig in. We're not going to let them reestablish, a defensive fortification line that now halts us. And once you halt, that the Ukrainians can stiffen all along the line. right now, as Ukrainians bring in forces, they're being ground up. They have to fall back, and the forces that come in aren't coming into a prepared position. They're coming into a very static position that Russia dominates, and they're killing them and continuing to push. The moment you hit pause, the glue gets to set. The Ukrainian forces get to come in, dig in, and they begin to gel. And the second the Russians resume, now it's going to cost them more to take that position. And while they're doing that, more Ukrainian forces are coming in. This is what has been defining this battle. It's a war of attrition, pouring in resources. But right now, the Ukrainians don't have resources, and those that they bring in are being ground up because of the fluid situation on the battlefield. Why would Putin yield this advantage? This is an advantage that the Russians have won over two plus years of hard fighting to break through those defenses. Russia has Ukraine exactly where you want. Total collapse on the battlefield. Just keep pushing. The Ukrainians have no choice but to die or withdraw. There's no defenses for them to fall in on. Those defenses are gone. So why would Russia ever give that up? Why would Russia say, yeah, what the hell, Christmas ceasefire? Because then you literally fall back to the position that you were, 6 months ago, which is a position you don't want to be in. You want to be exactly where you are right now. This is what you put all of your military effort into, achieving this result. And now the Ukrainians are in a general retreat on the battlefield, and there's no reversing this. You're not going to stop the Russian advance. Russia has significant forces in there that can continue to do the rotation, continue to put the pressure, and exploit situations as they develop. For instance, the need to break through and capture the totality of Kharkov, or perhaps even swing down and take Odessa, which is now two options on the table. Putin and Medvedev have hinted at this to the West. If you don't give us what we're looking for, we can change this. It won't just be the 5 territories that you'll be forced to give. It'll be maybe 2 more, 3 more, 4 more. We can go as long as you want. We can sustain this. Ukraine can't, and it only gets worse for Ukraine going forward. This isn't, a bad moment that, Ukraine's going to be able to turn it around. Ukraine will never. Today's the best day for the Ukrainian army that's going to exist at this point, because tomorrow's going to get worse, and the next day is going to get worse, and it's only going to get worse. And you start to see the panic in the Ukrainians as they recognize they're going to have to accept a deal that they're going to have to give away territories, and give away territories on terms that aren't good for them, meaning permanently give away territories. And when I say give away, the Russians already have them, but permanently say these are no longer part of Ukraine. We no longer have any claim on them. And then the West will lift saying Russia's not going to play this game, make all these sacrifices, only to freeze into a situation that allows Ukraine to say down the road, well, we're going to launch a counterattack. These territories are really ours. We'll want NATO come to our assistance. No, Ukraine is defeated. And that's the reality. And the West is defeated. The West doesn't get a vote. They don't get to say, no, we're going to put Western troops patrolling a DMZ. There will be no DMZ. The war will be over. Ukraine will have lost. NATO will have lost. And that's just the reality. And Russia's not going to yield on that.
Talk about this number that Russia recently put out there, Russia's defense ministry, around Ukraine's losses since 2022. 1 million, they're saying 1 million Ukrainian troops killed. Do you find these numbers to be believable given the situation that has transpired in the conflict thus far?
Well, given that I was saying that in the fall of 2023 that the Ukrainian casualties are up to around 700,000. Yeah, I'd say they're believable. They might even be lowballing it some, because we just don't know. That Ukraine, this is a corrupt regime populated by generals that don't care about the men they lead. They view them as just throwaway resources, and they view their deaths as a way to make money. Ask all hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian widows out there, or they're really widows, but the government won't acknowledge their widow status. They won't acknowledge that these men have died. Why? To do that, you have to make that payout. Instead, they take the pay and it goes in the pockets of these corrupt generals. Every aspect of Ukraine is corrupt. Every aspect of this is a rotting, festering, ridiculous nation state. Now, people can say, well, that's Russia's fault for coming in. No, it was corrupt beforehand. Then you layer onto that just the sickness, this Ukrainian nationalism that is predicated on the concept of, Aryan-like supremacy. They're literally the modern day manifestation of the Aryan nation of Nazi Germany. This Banderist notion that the world revolves around Ukraine, Western Ukraine in particular, is a sickness. Ukraine is a diseased nation. It is a rabid dog, and this is where I get in trouble with a lot of people. I don't care. Rabid dogs need to be shot. That's why I keep bringing up To Kill a Mockingbird and Atticus Finch coming out with the rifle and shooting the rabid dog that's in the streets of his town. Ukraine is a rabid dog in the world community. It can't be allowed to live in its current manifestation. Finish the job, and then whatever's left over, make sure that it never gets rabies again.